Before I applied for comic relief, I was f***ed. But now with guns and equipment, I am able to look after myself once more. And this one.
Without comic relief, I would be history. But they let me do what I want. They even cancelled my debt and gave me a $13 million interest-free loan to build a magnificent palace.
So don't delay. Phone comic relief today.
But with over 800 Chinese companies in Africa, there's inevitably some resentment, particularly when the Chinese undercut local textile workers with cheap imports.
Cheaper than Africa. That's pretty bloody amazing. Be that as that.
Oh, but then who hasn't made mistakes in Africa? I know we have. Quite a lot of them, actually. But give them their due. The Chinese get things done over there. You know, that's what comes of being pragmatic. I think it was Deng Xiaoping who said, not to me, unfortunately, he said, "Who cares what cat looks like, so long as it catches mice?" Yeah. Well, actually, I'll tell you who cares, the mice. And in this particular analogy, the Africans are playing the mice. Bloody well, actually.
But Africa's huge mineral resources have led to what's called the paradox of plenty and some interesting positions in the international league tables. Oh, yes, indeed. In 1984, interestingly enough, Gabon was the world's highest per capita consumer of champagne. Oh, yes. And in 2006, Equatorial Guinea, even more interestingly enough, 120th in the United Nations Development League, right, one above Sunderland, had the world's second largest GDP per capita. For the Chinese, though, the biggest prize was oil. By 2006, they were importing 3.5 million barrels a day from Africa.
Well, it's one of God's little jokes, isn't it? Well, actually, come to think of it, one of his biggest jokes. A corker. When he was thinking where to put the oil, he thought, I know, let's put most of it in the Middle East, and why not park a good lot of it in Sudan? God's first law of geopolitics. Famine plus dictatorship plus mineral deposits equals trouble. Naughty God.
I'm fed up with all this talk about genocide. What do you in the West know about genocide? You haven't done it properly for 60 years. Okay, you dabble a bit here and there in Yugoslavia, etc. But it is the feed of the chicken.
It's a simple enough deal. China gets oil, Sudan gets arms. You know what really gets me? The fact that all they're interested in is oil. And they could do it with only 10,000 guys. In Iraq, we needed more than 200,000. And those are troops we need elsewhere, like in Africa. And that's why we established in 2007 our African Command. It's a military command for Africa, because it's a big country with a lot of oil. And that means we need our soldiers there. And they're getting closer. You know, right now they're based in Stuttgart. And as soon as we find someplace in Africa that'll take us, we'll be there before you can say mission accomplished. You know, I know there's a lot of talk of the Chinese army going into Darfur. Well, we'd want to know about that. You can't just say, hey, that's an evil regime. There's a lot of oil there. We're going to send in the troops, change the regime and pump out the oil. What kind of country would do a thing like that?
George Mparbe, you are president of a Central African country.
Yes, I am.
But I gather you're not prepared to tell us which one.
No. No, it now is state secret on account of, as soon as you mention the name, the scurrilous accusations start flying about concerning the so-called human rights violations supposed to be going on, which is a ghastly travesty of the facts.
Who is making these accusations?
Oh, you know, those members of the opposition party what are still not in jail. Also, the United Nations agencies in Geneva what constantly put their noses in other people's business. Anyway, what do they know about it? Lounging about in Switzerland, scoffing the Toblerone, and watching the cuckoo clocks popping in and out. Nothing, they know nothing, they know nothing.
Can we talk about your relations with China? It's very heavily dependent on oil, isn't it?
Well, it all fits together. We got the oil, they got the spades. It's good for everybody.
So does that provide a lot of employment for your people?
Oh, no, we don't go in much for employment. Giving the population too many ideas.
Ideas about what?
Oh, you know, freedom, democracy, trade unions, all the things that trouble the minds of the simple, fun-loving people that I rule over. Picturesque poverty is more the sort of thing we're aiming at.
But, I mean, how do you run the installations and factories the Chinese pay for here?
Oh, they bring in their own people to do most of that. Yes, they're used to working all the hours of the day and night. We just provide a few of the middle-ranking executives. That mainly just for show. All they do is sit around smoking the gigantic spliffs and doing the online bingo.
Isn't there a danger here? The ex-president Thabo Mbeki of South Africa has warned of an unequal relationship with the Chinese where they've become the new colonialist power.
Oh, no. Colonialism is racist. I have fought against racism all my life. But the Chinese, they're not racist. No. That's one thing I like about these slitty-eyed yellow people.
So it's just a commercial partnership?
Oh, you have hit the nail on the head. The old colonial powers thought they were bringing in the Western civilization to us benighted savages, but the Chinese, they're not interested in any of that. They're just in it for the oil, and we just in it for the money.
So are you saying that politics isn't involved at all in China-African relations?
No, I'm not saying, but it's a two-way street. In the last 10 years, there have been 11 anti-Chinese proposals on human rights put forward at the United Nations. Every one of them has been defeated. That would not have happened without African support.
And your country must get enormous revenues from oil paid by the Chinese.
Aye, wateringly enormous.
And what do you spend it on? Schools, health? Because the theory of development is that if you get people out of poverty, increase their wealth, so they start paying taxes, then it becomes a virtuous circle of growth.
All that for the birds. Why do I need to improve the lot of the people? What damn good do it do to me? I get more money from the royalties on the oil than I ever could from taxing the layabouts what live in my country. So I don't have to think about that. My government don't have to think about that. The education minister can concentrate on his sodomizing activities. And there's a happy prospect for young and old alike.
Thanks to China.
Thanks to China, yes.
Thank you.
You know, the one thing about China is you may think they're ahead of the curve with construction and manufacturing and what have you. But when it comes to banking and finance, they're still in high school. They can't do half the things we do.
係喎，好彩 just as bloody well, matey. If you're so sophisticated, how come you just had to give your banks nearly $1 trillion? If that's an example of the latest techniques in international banking, you can keep it. I wouldn't mind, but it's our bloody money.
But while America needs China's money to keep it afloat, China's equally dependent on the West buying their stuff. A third of their exports go to Europe, another third to the United States. So if there is a big global slowdown, growth in China could slow to 8 or 9%.
8 or 9%. I dream about 8 or 9% growth. You know, sometimes late at night when Sarah's asleep, I creep out of bed and down the corridor and into the boys' bedroom, and I sit on the end of the bed and I tell them softly about all the things their daddy would do if the economy had 8 or 9% growth.
So the two economies depend on each other. Well, that's right, Hugh. America needs Chinese cash. But the Chinese are the most exposed of all the major 10 economies to a downturn in exports. In economic terms, Hugh, China and the West are like two one-legged men on an ever-quickening treadmill, leaning against each other, unable to get off, and looking for ingenious ways to stay upright as the pace quickens. But looking increasingly desperate as they do so, and inevitably destined for an extremely painful crash. And presumably a ban from the gym for using the equipment so irresponsibly. So what does China do with all the money it has when it isn't lending it to the Americans? Well, firstly, Hugh, it has to invest in infrastructure and production capacity in order to support the 25 million jobs they need to create every year. And secondly, with all that budget surplus, $250 billion this year. There's a huge boom in lending. And where there's a boom, there's a bust. That's right, Hugh. Already we've seen a number of